So this is plant responses, growth factors or growth hormones. Okay, so AQA and EdXL students, you're going to call these things growth factors. OCR, you're going to call them growth hormones. Same thing, just a different slightly flavor to what they want you to call them. And WJC as well. I mean, you're not going to get marked down for calling these one thing or the other. I'm just going to label these. Okay, so plants respond to changes in their environment to increase their chance of survival. So we can give an example of that. Clearly, we can say that plants are going to grow towards light so that they're going to increase their rate of photosynthesis. So a key term that's going to be pretty essential for us to use throughout this lesson is tropism. So what is a tropism? It's the response of a plant to a directional stimulus, and I'll explain what that means in a moment. So a directional stimulus is one that's coming from a particular direction. So an example might be if you've got light shining in from this way, in this direction, then that's a directional stimulus. If you've just got humidity, which is effectively equal everywhere during this area here, then that's not a directional stimulus, because if you move this way, the humidity is the same here to how it is here. Whereas if you've got light coming from here, if you go away from the light, then you're going to be receiving a weaker stimulus. So that's what we mean by directional stimulus. So here we're going to look at either growth factors or growth hormones, depending on your phrasing for your exam board. These things are exactly the same. They're literally just a different name for the same thing. So we can say plants respond to stimuli using growth factors or growth hormones. Why do they do this? Well, they don't have a circulatory system to respond using hormones like we do, or they don't have a nervous system to respond with nerves, with muscles. So let's look at a couple of examples of what these compounds might be. So we've got auxins, which are probably the most common that you're going to look at. Auxins, and specifically, we're going to look at this one called IAA. And these control, well, depending on what they're acting on. In shoots, they're going to cause cell elongation, and in roots, they're going to inhibit cell growth and cause it to. So they do different things in different places. For the purposes of this, I'm going to put shoots. They cause cell elongation. So they make the cells longer. They actually don't cause cell division, which is that they're not causing the cells to divide more. They're causing the cells to, the cell walls get a bit stretchy and the cells get longer. I might just put there, not cell division. Okay, we're going to maybe mention another one here called gibberellins or gibberellins. These are responsible for controlling flowering and germination in plants. There's a whole host of these things. Going into too much detail, if we need more detail, we'll look at them in another lesson. But what can we say about all growth factors or all growth hormones is that they are made in the growing regions of the plant, which are the root tips and the shoot tips. I'm going to put this in another color so it stands out. So right at the very tip of the root and the shoot, that's where the cells are growing actively and dividing. They move short distances through the plant by diffusion and active transport, and they move long distances in the phloem. and they move long distances in the phloem. Okay, so I'm now going to try and fit in my little diagrams down here on, we need to know two types of tropisms. One response to light, and one is a response to gravity. So response to light we call phototropism. If the tropism is towards something, we call it a positive tropism, and if it's away from something, we call it a negative tropism. Again, there's different terminology here for the different exam boards. Most exam boards are going to call it geotropism. AQA decided this year to call it gravitropism. I don't know why they've changed their mind on that. So geotropism is everyone, and unless you're AQA, in which case they're calling it gravitropism, and that's AQA only. Okay, let's look at what IAA does. This is indole acetic acid, I think. IAA is an acceptable shorthand. I never write it out in full. So we can say that in phototropism, IAA is always going to move to the shaded side. Of the root or the shoot. And we can say in geotropism or gravitropism, the IAA always moves to the underside. So that goes with gravity. Okay, so I'm going to do my shoots in green. So assuming we've got some light coming from the top here, which I've not really put my light on, have I? We're going to get the IAA is going to go to the shaded side. In shoots, this is going to cause cell elongation. So the cells where the IAA is, i.e. on the bottom, are going to lengthen, which is going to cause the shoot to bend towards the light. So I'm going to do my shoots in green. This is going to be very tight on space. Wish me luck. So in roots, you might have guessed at this point, we don't want roots growing towards the light. So if we've got light coming from a similar angle, it's going to cause the opposite effect in roots. So IAA always is going to move to the shaded side. So the IAA is still in the shaded side, and we've still got light coming from above. But in roots, it has the opposite effect. So it's not going to cause cell elongation. In roots, it's going to prevent cell division. It's going to inhibit cell growth so that the roots grow away from the light. So in shoots we'd call this positive phototropism, and in roots we call it negative phototropism. Okay, so very similar thing. We can exactly the same model on the other side. So we'll look at shoots first. We've got gravity. Obviously, we know that the force of gravity is going to be pulling straight down. Light isn't always coming straight down. In our shoots, it goes to the IAA goes to the underside. Okay, so the IAA once again, it's produced in the growing regions. It goes to the underside, which is going to cause it cell elongation in the shoots, and it's going to cause it to grow away from gravity. I'll do my diagram here as well. So in roots, it's going to move to the underside, so it moves to the same side each time. But remember, in roots, it does the opposite effect. It's going to prevent cell growth, and therefore it's going to grow towards gravity. So the cell elongation is exactly the same. It's basically going to grow away from gravity. So maybe I can squeeze in here. I sacrificed IAA causes cell elongation and IAA inhibits cell growth, because that's the same for both of these. If you can fit that in, maybe the repeat is worth doing. But this we would call towards gravity. We'd call this positive geotropism or gravitropism. I'm going to use geotropism. And obviously this would be negative geotropism or gravitropism. I think you get the picture. That is the basics of how plants use growth factors or growth hormones to control their movement.